allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time on the screen, you should see the announcements of meetings. As understood, we had to postpone some and cancel some, and we have upcoming meetings as well. For the foreseeable future, they will be virtual until it is so deemed that it is safe to be out in public with other people. At this point, I would like to bring forward a motion to suspend policy 006.1 to allow for this virtual meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion. Mr. Weiss.
Actually, it was about the upcoming public meetings. Did we make a decision on committee meetings for later in the year?
Sure. So no, we're still in discussions about committee meetings. However, we can continue that conversation. We'll do the motion first. Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Weiss? Oh, okay. All right. Hearing no further questions, all those, and please remember to unmute yourselves. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. The second motion is to ratify all actions taken by the Phoenixville Area School Board directors at the meeting that we had last month, May 15th on Sunday. Do I have
March 15th?
March 15th, excuse me. Sunday, March 15th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. Hearing none, this time we will vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, you will receive notification then to determine the reasons for abstention. This time we're going to do public comment. In this venue, unfortunately, it is more challenging. However, we did open, we have board meetings at pasd.com is where we ask that public comment come in. You can do so as well. At the conclusion of the meeting, we'll have a second round of public comments. So throughout the meeting, if you should have a comment, please feel free to email. It will be read at the conclusion of the meeting. We welcome public comments on any school subject from residents of PSC or others who have a business or group affiliation with the district. Please send those emails to boardmeeting@pasd.com. At the beginning of the public comment, please include the name, municipality, and the topic. At the conclusion of public comment, we will address anything that we can. Anything that cannot, we will address in future meetings. And at this time, Dr. Whitehead will read the comments that we have received thus far. Dr. Whitehead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned that we should be seeing an agenda or a schedule. There's nothing on the screen.
We wouldn't. The screen is going to be posted for those who are watching online on the website or on Phantom TV. That's where it will be posted. So the viewing can see the agenda that we're seeing in the meetings that we were seeing.
The agenda is also online for folks, so they can go online and grab the agenda as well.
Is that not being shared with the rest of it so that we can all see each other? Is that why?
That is correct, yeah.
Correct. Go ahead, Dr. Whitehead. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. We have about 8 public comments here. Some have asked that their second comment be read at the second public comment. So I will start. The first comment is from Mr. Glenn Davis, 50 Meadowbrook Lane, Phoenixville. His comment is as follows. Dear board members, has there been an official conclusion or results on the school district's audit? It has been quite some time now, and I'm sure taxpayers are interested in the findings. That's the first public comment.
No, mute.
Keep
You
reading
need
the
to unmute
public
yourself,
comment.
Dr. Whitehead. Please, Barr.
There we go. Thank you. Second public comment is from, hold on, there we go. Mr. Mike Ellis, dear board members, has there been official conclusion or results on the school district's audit? I'm sorry, apologies. There we go. Mr. Mike Ellis, what are the board and administration's contingency plans if district revenue falls short of target in this fall's tax collections due to coronavirus economic related issues? Next public comment is from Karen Guerrero from Schuylkill Township. Her comment is, when do you expect the forensic audit to be completed? When will taxpayers find out about the investigation, details, and results? How much money has been spent on this to date? How much money will be spent? And what are the expected outcomes? Next public comment is from Mrs. Joan Cadigan, the Executive Director of the PCEF. PCEF would like to thank the generous community members who have donated to our Together We Can Fund, which is now raising money to support remote learning tools and emergency food supplies for students and families in need. Since March, when the PCEF and the district issued an appeal for donations to this fund, almost $50,000 has been raised from over 300 individual donors. Donations are still being accepted at pcefonline.com. We are truly blessed to live in a community that quickly and generously responds with donation of time and money, and most importantly, compassion for others. Thank you, Joan Cadigan, Executive Director. Okay, moving on. Okay. The next public comment is from Mr. John Mraz, Schuylkill Township, Meadowbrook Lane. Rather lengthy, but it does fit into 3 minutes, I timed. Good evening, this is John Mraz, Schuylkill Township. I'm requesting that these written comments be included in with the official meetings of the meeting. Definition of virtual meeting. A virtual meeting is when people around the world, regardless of their location, use video and audio to be online. Virtual meetings allow people to share information and data in real time without being physically located together. This meeting is a regular meeting broadcast as usual with the public without public participation, not a virtual meeting for us, the public. Only board members and administration will have the opportunity to speak in real time. His next comment is forensic audit. What is the status and update on the forensic audit? It has been 6 months since it started. Go to the district website, business office, audited financial statements. You will see a listing of the 2019 forensic audit information. The only item that appears is the engagement letter from Eisner Amper, a national accounting firm, signed October 29th. For services that would not exceed $50,000, whereas the audit report for public review, annual report. According to the school website, the annual audit of June 30th, 2019, conducted by Rayner and Company, is now posted. It does not contain any note on the forensic audit. Why? Either Rayner saw the forensic audit and based on what they heard, it was not material. Is that correct? Or the forensic audit is not completed and Rayner then should have added a note on 6/30/19 report stating that if that is the case, why is it not completed? Do not use the COVID-19 as an excuse. This district must have serious problem if that was just a oversight. But number 3, why do I keep hearing that the district had a serious internal control issues and that missing cash was a central issue? Item 4, if that is not true, then the administration board needs to tell the public exactly why the district needed to hire an auditing firm for $50,000. Where is the transparency? Request for proposal audit services. The district has now put out an RFP for audit services with a due date of April 24th, 2020. In that proposal, under scope of work, it reads, the audit will encompass a financial and internal control audit of the financial records and systems of PASD for the school year ending June 30th. If that scope of work was included in the previous agreement with Rayner and Company, and the forensic audit found the lack of controls, did Rainier fulfill its responsibilities, or did they notify administration and the administration did not act? If so, someone needs to be held accountable once we see the results of the forensic audit. Lastly, HR termination. Last month, I commented on the HR office and requested that the board inform the public of the amount of the termination or severance package. In December 2019, the school board approved the termination of the HR director. This was after the former HR director received a raise in October of 2019. That concludes Mr. Mraz's public comments. Mrs. Mraz's public comments. Okay. These are comments from Kathleen Mraz, Middlebrook Lane, Schuylkill Township. Good evening, this is Kathleen Mraz. I'm requesting that these written comments be included in the official minutes of the meeting. Is it costing the district more money to teach during this pandemic? What has the district done to eliminate or reduce expenses during this closing? Any business would be able to produce a report with descriptions and amounts to show how this is being done. Costs have increased. Please show us a schedule highlighting those increases so the public is aware. This should be provided now or no later than next week's meeting. Are we paying the transportation companies during this time? If yes, is it due to the contracts and how they were written? And if payments are being made to the transportation companies, are the companies paying the drivers? And out of the $104 million allocated to Pennsylvania under the CARES Act, what portion of that $104 million will be provided to this district using the state's basic education subsidy formula? And lastly, as discussed in previous meetings, the board should immediately request that the money is sitting in the checking account under the control of the Phoenixville Boosters Club that was received for the rental of athletic fields being transferred to the district school fund for the use of meals and related expenses of the COVID-19 crisis. The last known amount exceeded $75,000. That is concludes Mrs. Mraz's. Okay. We have a comment from Mrs. Lisa Longo. Phoenixville Borough resident. For months now, second, I just skipped. There we go. For months now, there have been questions regarding the ongoing investigation and forensic audit of PASD and the many issues regarding non-disclosure, lack of transparency, and long-term systemic issue at the district uncovered last fall. Very specific questions have been asked regarding any use of the accepted audited reports due to the very substantive issues and concerns regarding potential material errors and omissions. This board has failed to respond to the questions. Due to the inaction of the board, I was forced to contact the PA Attorney General, PA Auditor General, District Attorney, and Phoenixville Police. I was told that the actions I described could constitute criminal acts and still no response from the board. No action, nothing. I was advised of criminal investigation and asked to cooperate. I agreed to provide all documents and was interviewed by police. I continue to attempt to contact the board, offer assistance, and ascertain the use, if any, of the accepted audited reports. Any use of these reports, especially to refinance bonds without proper disclosure, may constitute securities fraud. This board was made aware of the issues and moved forward with accepting these reports anyway, and has refused to answer simple questions. Are these reports being sent to any outside organizations with regard to bond refinancing? When will the forensic audit be done? Will the report be made public as the prior board agreed? It is disturbing that we, the public, you were elected to serve, cannot get simple, straightforward answers to these questions. It is also disturbing that the financial audit was performed by the same firm that failed to uncover numerous errors over the last several years. I had asked that this firm not be allowed to conduct this audit. I was assured the forensic audit would verify the audit. So where is the forensic audit report? We know there are multiple issues, including, but not limited to, the diversion of district funds without board approval or knowledge, possible misuse of district funds, possible attempts to hide violations of board and district policy, failure of internal controls, and overpayments for years to municipality of local taxes. These alone are substantive material errors and omissions. Both the audit firm and the current administration need to be held accountable. During my time as an elected member of the board, and while I served as president, It was our agreement that all information would be shared regarding the finding of the forensic audit. We all agreed to the scope set based on what is now being shared. That agreement is being ignored. This is not normal board behavior. Also, the prior board has an understanding certain policies taken up with immediate action. This has also not happened. Both equity and policy and community tax rebate program have been removed from current discussion despite the promise to the previous board they would receive immediate attention. I almost concluded here. And yes, understand that there is a pandemic and many other issues. These items were removed prior to the start of the pandemic. Can the board explain why they have refused to answer these questions and why these items were not immediately taken up as promised? Both are needed now more than ever to alleviate some of the issues caused by the pandemic. Equity and the community tax rebate program need immediate action. When will these questions be answered? Will there be a public response at the next meeting? That concludes Mrs. Longo. And we have 2 write-in ones that just occurred now. Also from Ms. Longo. Sorry. Why were prior meeting actions ratified? That's a comment from Ms. Longo that just came in. That concludes the first half of the public comments.
Thank you, Dr. Whitehead. I wanted to address one piece and then turn it over to Dr. Fagley to address some of the other pieces like the cost reducing. I think that's something that we can easily address, things that we have done, steps we have taken to reduce costs while we are out of schools. But very quickly, Ms. Longo has made several repeated legal threats against the school district. Therefore, we are constrained to all communication going through counsel. She has been made aware of this. So at this time, Dr. Fagley, if you wouldn't mind speaking to some of the cost savings that we've utilized and the bus company piece as well, we can speak to. Thank you.
Regarding the bus company, we are currently in negotiations with the bus company. As folks may know, Pennsylvania passed a law asking that all school districts negotiate with their bus company based off of costs. So we are in that process. We do not know at this point whether they are or are not paying because we're still in the process of doing the negotiations with them. Mr. Fazio, Mr. Gibson, and their teams have done an absolutely outstanding job of working at reducing costs as much as possible. And there's very few of us in the buildings, but for those few of us that are in the buildings, when we're in the building right now, I can tell you it is probably heated at most to 60 degrees. I was wearing multiple layers today, but because of that, the good news is we've reduced energy costs by somewhere in the area of 60%, if not more. Specifically in electricity over the last 4 weeks, I believe it is, we saved about $4,000 a week. So it is really amazing what they've done. They've turned off all the various lights, various heating elements, blower fans, refrigerators have been turned off as we've consolidated all the food into one refrigerator or one freezer. So they've really been doing a tremendous job of doing energy reduction throughout. There are also other cost saving measures that we're undertaking. And part of that is because of the really fantastic staff we have. Phoenixville staff have been working through this entire situation. And by working, we've actually started to move into doing summer work. So by moving into doing summer work already, instead of having to put out to contract, which we were actually planning on asking the board to do at this meeting, a paint job for Barclay School, we're now doing that entire job in-house. Now, granted, it does cost us a little bit. We did have to buy a sander to sand the walls for $113, and we are going to be buying the paint for that job. But the difference in cost is absolutely incredible. The overall bid would have been somewhere in the area, I believe, of $120,000 to $150,000, and we will not be seeing that as a cost passed on. So we're looking at those jobs and other jobs that would have been put out typically for contract work because of the short summer time span, and we're actually getting in there now. But again, I want to go back and reiterate my thanks to the maintenance and the custodial staffs. And I'll get to the teachers and everyone else later, but right now, the maintenance and the custodial staffs for their absolutely tremendous job at helping to reduce costs and jump on this opportunity to get extra work done. So there have been some significant savings that have been able to take place. Are there some additional costs with us going online? Of course. We've had to buy some Zoom licenses. We've had to buy some other materials that we may not have necessarily bought. But I can tell you that Mr. Fazio is keeping a complete record of that because it is our intent to submit them into FEMA as additional costs that we have to undertake based off of this pandemic situation. To that end, it was also asked, how much money do we think we're going to see from the 104 million CARES Act? We believe it's somewhere in the area of $300,000. We're waiting to get that exactly so we know how to submit for it. They have yet to give us that direction. But we have been putting in for other grants that have been coming through. Recent grant that went in was for approximately $20,000 to buy more Chromebooks for those who are disadvantaged so that they will have a laptop permanently at their home versus one of the lenders that we are currently have given them to help take care of the situation. So lots of really, really good work taking place. And again, I'd like to thank the maintenance, the custodial staff. As I said, later on in this meeting, I'll get to the teaching staff because they've just been also doing incredible work as we are keeping education, the continuance of learning going on. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So at this time, we're going to go on to committee reports. And just prior to doing that, I just want to let folks know we have not met as a committee, as for any of our committees in the past month. We are discussing how to move forward with committee meetings, and we will ensure that they are public as well. Some of these items are rollover items, and some of them have come up as a result of what's been going on. So this will be the first time we're discussing some of these items. And at this point, I'll turn over to Mr. Caltagirone for Buildings and Grounds.
Thank you. So we have 4 items on the Building and Grounds agenda. And as Mrs. Emanuel spoke to just a second ago, these are really rollovers in terms of what was discussed at the last meeting. The first 2 items are an approval for a contract to hire Schrader Associates to complete a feasibility study. That's for $19,512. And then the second part of that is the approval to hire Schrader to complete a SLEP study of the district, which is about $14,000, $14,268 to be exact. As we talked about at the last meeting, this was written as one proposal with 2 parts. And we're looking at this as a whole project with Schrader because they have worked with us in the past. They know us very well. They know the district very well. And we are getting a significant savings by having them do this. And they're providing that as part of this project. So this is something that is absolutely needed to move forward, both with the Hares Hill project and for the district as a whole with the SLEP study, as I think our SLEP study is now about 5 years old at least, and we are due for a new study. So that's what we're voting on with items 1 and 2. Excuse me. For item 3, as we items 3 and 4, as we discussed with Barclay, Dr. Fagan just mentioned, they are doing, our staff are doing fantastic work, stripping the wallpaper and painting all the walls and doing all that wonderful work in there, which is going to save the district a significant sum of money. However, there are some things that we cannot do, and that's what 3 and 4 are on this agenda, which is the concrete project out in front of Barclay School, which has a cost not to exceed of $53,575. That is concrete work that needs to get done, and I think that speaks for itself. The other one is the ongoing discussion about the boilers at Barclay, and we talked about this at the last meeting. We're getting a significant discount, or I should say percentage off on the replacing the boilers because they did have sort of a short lifespan, all things considered. They went about 10 years for us, and we're having to replace them again. So we're looking to approve this contract for the boilers at Barclay not to exceed $115,000. I will at this point defer to Mr. Gibson to see if he wants to jump in with any additional information on any of that.
Thank you, Mr. Caltagirone. The only addition I'll add to that is on the, not only are we getting a savings on the purchase and the installation of the boilers, but they're also adding what would normally be a 1-year warranty to them. They're giving us a 5-year warranty. Now, these boilers that we're looking to put in, they will come up to, they have a life expectancy of about 20 years, which matches the rest of the district. But it's in going with that discount in the purchase and installation, it's a pretty big deal that they're offering us a 5-year warranty on these boilers as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. I'm going to pass it back over to Mrs. Emanuel and allow her to pull in questions. I see some raised hands there, and I'll let Mrs. Emanuel take care of those.
And real quick, before I do that, SLEP is Service Life Expectancy Plan, correct?
Extension program.
Program, okay. So I just, for folks who aren't familiar with the acronym, wanted to make sure folks understood. So Dr. Serini, you had a question? Comment?
Yes, I just wanted to ask my board peers if we want to maybe hold off on hiring the architectural firm and investing these dollars, given the state of the economy and uncertainty with how many things are evolving. Just something to consider.
Does anyone want to respond to that before I call on the next person? Mr. Goldberg?
I think Mr. Weiss had his hand up first.
Sorry, I didn't know if you were responding to Dr. Serini. Okay.
Well, I am, but I think that Mr. Weiss still had his hand up first on that.
We conclude this topic, and then unless Mr. Weiss is on the same topic.
What I'm saying is, I think Mr. Weiss and I are both on the same topic, and he raised his hand first.
Okay.
I
Mr.
think.
Weiss.
I think. Just trying to be courteous.
Thank you. I just wanted to relay to the public a question that Mr. Caltagirone answered for me earlier, that approving these first two items does not bind us to using that firm as the architect for the Harris Hill project when we get to that point in time. If my understanding was correct, Mr. Caltagirone, I just wanted to make sure people realize that by saying yes to this, we were not committing beyond these two things at this time. And while I got my finger on the space bar, I think Dr. Serini's point is worth a discussion maybe during the course of this next week before we actually have to vote on these things. And now I'll let Dave correct me on what I was going to say.
Well, I think we have to have the discussion now. I don't know when else we would be able to do it. So you are correct, Mr. Weiss, and I guess more correct than you realize. I don't know how we're going to do it between now and then unless we do it now. I share Dr. Serini's concerns, and frankly, I share the concerns for probably 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's a big chunk of money. Not to say that it shouldn't be done, but I think we should. It's a lot of money. I think we should maybe talk about whether this is the most optimal time. I mean, if it has to happen, it has to happen. I get that, but there's maybe something that we should at least explore pushing off. I don't know the exact. I'd be lying if I knew the exact state of the boilers. That's just an example of the specifics I'm talking about. So I would like to talk a little more about those 4 line items.
Mr. Caltagirone, you had your hand up next.
So I'm sure we'll probably be going back and forth on all this, but I guess I'll respond to what we've said so far, or what's been said so far. So quite honestly, a lot of this work can't cease. I mean, we're still going to have students coming into this district whenever we are back in the buildings. We are going to need space. That is a foregone conclusion. We see our enrollment numbers. We've been looking at them for the last 2 years and, well, for the last decade, really, but the last 2 years since Palk and Manavon opened, and we know the trajectory. That's not going to stop just because of what's happening right now with COVID-19. The amount, and quite honestly, this work, especially for the feasibility study and the service life extension program for the district, we need that for the buildings moving forward. I mean, we need it for the district because the SLEP study is a district-wide study. It's not just for one building, it's for the entire district. So for those two, I think they are the first important steps to move forward. And as I said before, Schrader, we've worked with Schrader. Schrader has done many of these projects, not only with Phoenixville, but with many of the districts around our area. They are probably a go-to architect in this region for these types of projects. And I think delaying it puts us in an even more tenuous position moving forward in future school years. As for 3 and 4, I think given the problems that we had with the boiler back in December at Barkley, the boilers back in December, that just needs to get done. And we know that the issue with the boilers, they need to be replaced. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And as far as the concrete, it's a safety issue. I mean, this is primarily a safety issue. This stuff needs to happen. And this is coming out of, and Dr. Fagley can correct me if I'm wrong, but at least the last two would be coming out of the capital budget, not the operating budget. So we're not talking about diverting funds from the general operating budget to pay for these projects. We have this money set aside in the capital budget for these projects, and I think the time is now to do them.
It's correct. The money would be coming from the capital fund.
Ms. Reed, you had a comment, question?
I have can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I have, with Mr. Caltagirone, for numbers 1 and 2 with the Schrader group, they actually, by performing the SLEP and the feasibility is the perfect money saving opportunity, where if we want to see how we can use our buildings most effectively and know not necessarily what type of school we're going to build, but I know Dr. Serini has spoken about let's use what we have more efficiently. That's where that money is. That's how we will know how to use it to utilize our spaces to the most efficiently. The boilers need to get done because I don't want to pay for another bus run to move all those kids back and forth from Barkley to middle school and back. And I believe the concrete is an ADA issue. Is that not true? American with Disabilities Act?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So that we have to do if we're going to have students in. The boilers we need to get done, otherwise that's going to cost us more in the future. And the other two things will improve our efficiency because someday the schools will open again.
Dr. Serini?
Thank you. A couple of miscellaneous points. The part about, I guess I'll start with numbers 1 and 2 with Schrader. Economists are relating this economic situation that we find ourselves in to even worse than the subprime mortgage mess that we went through in 2008, 2009. And it's also been related to the Great Depression. I believe strongly that the data we have used up until just a month or two ago is now obsolete. And we need to consider not moving forward at a time when we have, I think the last time I checked, the number was 22 million people collecting or filing for unemployment. And in addition, our country's in an economic crisis. I think we seriously need to consider what we're going to do and wait maybe a month to get some additional data. The enrollments may not stop, but if people don't have jobs and they cannot go to work, they can't move. If there's legislation that's suggesting that there's moratoriums on foreclosures, that's even more evidence. There's too much going on that I think we need to wait. I also think that with any and all bids right now, there's a few principles that we should keep in mind when we do decide to spend money. And number one is, whenever possible, if there is a local to Phoenixville contractor or someone who can bid where we can keep the local economy stimulated, that should be given a priority if possible and feasible. I also believe that because of the amount of people who are out of work, that if we were to put bids out right now or requests for bids, we would get competitive pricing across the board. So I'm not sure, maybe that's already been done, but maybe we should do it again. I'm just suggesting that with everything, the uncertainty that continues to evolve day to day, that we proceed very conservatively and cautiously and use the historical implications of what happened in 2008, 2009, when our economy was moving in a more favorable direction and then abruptly stopped. I agree that at one point we will need to understand what and how we can use our resources, but it would be premature right now because our economic situation is unfolding and still uncertain. And so we don't know if in fact our physical infrastructure is going to meet our needs because we don't know what the new normal is. So I don't disagree that having that data point is critical. I think it's absolutely critical. I'm just suggesting that maybe we slow it down a tad, even a month, just to see what happens. If we look back a month as to what's unfolded, I don't think anyone could have fathomed the circumstance that we're in right now. And so I just ask that we proceed very cautiously and conservatively. And I believe those were all my points I wanted to make. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you. My first question is regarding you, Mr. Calderon. You said that number 3, the concrete was a matter of safety, and I believe there was confirmation also that regarding Ms. Reed's comment that there was some ADA compatibility involved here. Would there be a way to do the concrete work seriatim? And when I say that, I mean, can we get away with just doing the concrete work that wouldn't minimize safety and just concrete work that would put us in ADA compliance? Or does it have to be all the concrete work?
I guess to your point, I'll just jump in very quickly. I will ask Mr. Gibson to respond specifically to that because he has a better understanding of all of the aspects of the concrete work that need to get done.
Yeah, that question was to whoever could answer it.
So, and to answer your question on the concrete work, we did look at that originally to see if there was a way. We obviously in the beginning didn't want to go to 53,000, but the only way to really do it one of the problems is the zigzag ramp that goes up. There's not enough space on the turn. So in order to widen that, the whole thing has to be pulled apart and reset with new railings and so forth. So short answer to your question is the only way to really do it is to do the whole piece. That whole front needs to be jackhammered off and reset because of the way it was originally designed. It doesn't meet today's standards, and the speaking to the safety issue, pieces of it are falling apart. Going back to the two Schrader quotes, be reminded on those quotes too, they can be pulled apart. That the slat piece of that is to look at the condition of all of our buildings, roofs, boilers, alarm systems, so that that can speak to a savings there. So they can actually be pulled apart. And the boilers, I did hear those as well, and I'll just touch on those for a moment, is that while yes, we do want to replace the boilers, and we did have the issue in December, recall that I did bring forward in the one committee meeting last month, or the month prior, I forget, when we looked at the existing boilers, while the one core in the one still has a slow leak, and it would cost almost half of what the quoted replacement for the two is. It would cost almost half that much to tear that boiler apart, replace that core, and fix it.
Okay, well then that obviates the need for my next question, but I do have one or two more. When did these RFPs last? When did these bids go out last?
We went out looking, I believe it was January, February, right after the incident happened, we began looking at it. For the boilers, I mean, or that?
I'm talking about for all of them. When did all the RFPs go out?
We went out looking for prices. We didn't do a formal advertised RFP. We went out looking for prices for multiple vendors. And we did that through from both January and February.
Any reason to believe that the price might be different now, considering, I mean, I needed plumbing work in my house 6 months ago, and I told the plumber I wasn't ready, and he called me back 3 days ago and said, hey, I'm really hurting. How about if I shave 30% off the price? Any equivalent of that possible?
We can certainly look at other vendors.
Or even the same vendors. Is there any reason to believe that they wouldn't say, all right, we need the work, or we'll you know what I mean? I'm sure you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to check in on that. One of the problems we are having with some vendors is some companies are not actually fully operational right now. So we're running into some issues on that. I don't know that that's the fact with the current vendors that were selected, but that is we can certainly make those calls.
And this next question is my last one, and it goes hand in hand with this next question goes hand in hand with my last question. What if we did hold off for 30 days to explore, including exploring whether anyone can do any better, or whether we can get anyone that can, or whether we can get anyone that can do any better? What's the downside? Is it going to hurt us to hold off for 30 days on any of these?
The only potential downside is what we run into with schools very often is when we get in, or what we run into very often with summer work is you get into a scheduling competition with other schools. Now this year could be a little different, but that was one of the reasons we jumped on some of these projects early. So we didn't get into that problem this year, that we could actually get the companies, get in there, and actually in some instances that's worked out far better to work with them.
How many, well, I'm wondering if any more companies would now jump in to bid that maybe didn't really have any motivation to back in January because of the economy. So I'm looking at this thing in a couple of different directions. I think it would make sense to put this off for 30 days and send out for bids again.
And we can make some calls. That's completely doable. Are you talking just the concrete or everything?
I am talking, hold on a second. It probably wouldn't make, not on 1 and 2, I'm talking 3 and 4.
3 and 4, the one piece we might run into there is that we may lose the discounts and the warranties that are being offered.
Which discounts?
We're getting, I believe it was a 15% discount on the purchase and installation of them, plus and what normally comes with a 1-year warranty, they're offering us a 5-year warranty on them.
Yeah, I heard you say
That's
that.
for the
but-
boilers.
No, I heard you say that, but why would we be in jeopardy of losing those things if we waited 30 days?
Oh, I thought you were talking about it's not just waiting 30 days. If we looked at other vendors, I don't know if another vendor would give us those discounts and warranty.
Well, I guess that's my point. I want the 30 days to find out whether another one would. In addition to a lower price.
Sure,
But-
so that's.
And that might be a terrible idea. That's just me.
So can I make a very quick suggestion here, what folks think about it? Mr. Gibson can spend this week looking to see if he can get any updated numbers. If somebody wants, I mean, right now it's a voting item for next week's meeting. If somebody wants, based on the information that comes back or not, to make a motion to postpone the vote for 30 days, they're certainly able to do so. And then we could vote on that. And I want to make sure that I get to there were 2 other people that had questions or comments. I want to make sure I get to them, but just in terms of moving the discussion forward, we can have Mr. Gibson, and I saw he did give the thumbs up. So we can have him look this week to see if he can get any new numbers to present to us next week. And if somebody feels so moved, they can do a motion to postpone the vote. See several heads. Ms. Reed, did you? Nope. Okay. So Ms. Soto.
My question was there a deadline to get this work completed? Is the goal to get it done before the school year starts? And if so, will we have enough time if we delay this by 30 days?
We need Mr. Gibson to answer that.
Yes, the goal is to get this done before the school year starts. And that's one of the reasons we started early. So we can't do this work while kids are in school. And we were trying to avoid the summer rush. So we were trying to take advantage of this time to get it done and move on with the projects and complete the Barclay projects.
And I believe Barclay does have summer programs as well. So I don't know if that would affect the summer programs of kids trying to attend the school with this work being done.
If we're in school at that point. Lots of variables. Ms. Reed.
Okay, so
That was
everything.
a question. That was a question.
What was your question?
If this would affect, if I'm saying if, of course, it's if the kids are in school this summer, but would it affect getting this work done with kids being there? Like, would getting it done earlier help?
It would affect, if kids were there this summer, yes, that could potentially be an issue of us doing some of that work. It's certainly the concrete work. That's the way into the building, so we would certainly have an issue there. While we were speaking, I did just get a text from Mr. Von Tor, who must be tuning into the meeting, saying that he will be on the phone with vendors first thing in the morning.
All right, Ms. Reed.
So Dr. Fegley, have we had any guidance yet from Governor Wolf's office regarding when, if anything?
The governor just recently extended the stay-at-home order until May 8th. That said, we have not received any guidance beyond the end of the school year. As district leaders, we've been asking the governor to let us know what we can be doing for this coming summer with regards to summer school, et cetera. And we are waiting for some guidance on that. That said, looking at the guidelines that have been put out by the president and by others, I'm not optimistic right now. I can tell the board at this point that we are going with a virtual graduation on June 10th, but then we're going with a try date of August 1st for an in-person graduation. So that's when we're thinking maybe we may be able to. That said, we've also told the seniors that if it's not then, we will then wait until the end when we're allowed to, and then schedule those for 2 weeks after that date. So we have put plans out that will keep on going at this point for an extended period of time.
And then I'm assuming one of these guidelines we're following is the 14 days with declining cases.
Yeah, that's, in all honesty, I'm following what the Chester County Department of Health, Pennsylvania Department of Education, and the Pennsylvania Department of Health are telling us that we need to do. I'm assuming they're using those 14-day guidelines and all that other sort of good information, but I would come back with what they tell us and present the information to you, and as a board, sit there and make decisions. I think it's going to be a very challenging time as we get ready to come back, and I think we're going to start looking at lots of options as we move forward administratively and working with the faculty and the board on how do we return to school.
All right, thank you, everyone. So that concludes buildings and grounds. Next is curriculum. We have not met for the curriculum committee, and the curriculum department has just been working very, very hard. Thank you to Dr. Whitehead, Dr. Kilmetz, and everybody who's in that office to convert us to an online program, and working with the teachers and supporting their wonderful and incredible efforts to get to our students and do what they can for our students. So really appreciate that. We are going to start discussions as to when we can start this committee work. But want to have folks keep in mind, a lot of our discussion is going to be, how do we catch our students up? All the work in the world online is not the same as an in-person education. So for our students, our general education students, our special education students, we have a lot of work ahead of us, to make sure that they're where they need to be, and we need to be thoughtful in that process, and that will certainly be a very large part of our discussions moving forward. Mr. Weiss, calling you real quick.
Yes, we're talking about curriculum. I wanted to ask Dr. Fagley if he could give a brief update, if this is a good time or not. We'll do it some other time. We were looking at disproportionality things before the virus took over our calendar, I'll say. I realize the administration has been working on more pressing items, but I also know that they have been doing some, they've also been looking at some things in that area also. And I was wondering if this is not the right time, when would be a good time to maybe get a synopsis of kind of where we are with that, or just kind of an update on that, Dr. Fagley. Thank you.
Sure. Actually, the district administration faculty have been working very, very hard with our students who tend who fall into that area of disproportionality, those who are underrepresented. That is a group where over 500 laptops have been distributed to, over 100 Kajits have been distributed to, so that they are able to stay online and keep doing the work. We are doing a great deal of work on reaching out to those families right now to make sure that they are engaging in the learning process. As President Emanuel stated, online learning is not ideal, and online learning is absolutely not ideal when you have challenges of internet, when you have challenges of just a quiet space. So we've been working very, very hard, and I congratulate Dr. Whitehead, Dr. Kilmetz, and all the faculty for all their work in trying to get everybody online and doing as well as possible during this difficult time. We know we have work that we're going to have to make up. We know that. And it's going to be for all students. And that's some of the plans that Dr. Whitehead and Dr. Kilmetz are starting to put in place and working with the faculty and principals for next year as to as we move people up, how do we make sure that we get them caught up? So there's a lot of work. And in the other areas, you're right. Some of the stuff has been slowed down a little bit, Mr. Weiss, because we've been so focused on the day-to-day operations and making sure that we're doing as good of a quality education we can for everybody. It is my intent to have that report on the root cause analysis to the board. I'd hoped to have it in about 4 or 5 weeks ago. That got knocked out of the park, shall we say, by something I don't think any of us saw coming. Literally what I need is about 6 to 8 hours to sit down and not be interrupted so I can put together all the pieces that we have. So looking forward to getting that to you. I will try to commit to this coming month, May.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Goldberg.
I just want to make sure it's clear, Dr. Fegley, you were talking about underrepresented and 500 laptops. Again, if I understand correctly, the population of students that the state was talking about was the disproportionality we're talking about was for discipline regarding a certain percentage of African Americans with special needs. Is that right?
For that specific part of disproportionality, that is correct. When we're talking about those students who are underserved, I did broaden it out, Mr. Goldberg. But yes.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to keep it. I'm trying to keep it as narrow as possible because that I don't want to give any misimpressions to the public that the scope or the narrow casting that they gave us is any broader than it actually is, Dr. Fegley.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Next up, we have finance with Ms. Soto.
I'm just gonna unmute myself for a minute. The first thing we have on here, we have our personnel report. There are a couple of people being appointed for different positions, an employment agreement there. I don't know, I hope everyone had a chance to look at it, and if you had any questions, Sylvia, Mrs. Rockwood would be willing to help as well. The next item is our business office report. We have approval of our disbursement of school district funds for March and the acknowledging the receipt of the district financial reports. For C, item number 3, we have an authorization for the to display the 2020-2021 proposed final budget. This is just something that we do standard during this time before. It's just basically advertising that this is what our budget will be at that time when we get to that point. Number 4 is approval of the County of Chester Tax Claim Bureau's authorization for the removal of tax liens for listed parcels. These are several parcels that Chester County has been trying to collect taxes on for a long time. The list is on there. The majority of them, I believe, are all mobile homes. And the cost was minimal, maybe a couple $100 or $1,000 or $2,000, about $1,000 for these homes. And Chester County, basically acknowledged that they just weren't going to keep pursuing these pieces of land because of the time and money it was costing them for the amount that's owed. It's just, wasn't worth it. So they went ahead and asked for us to approve this. So we're just kind of just giving them the okay, but they pretty much decided this themselves. To go ahead and do this. Number 5 was approval of a settlement for the Thompson brothers tax assessment appeals. And as I keep going, if Mr. Fazio has anything to add, if I miss anything, I just, just let me know if I miss it, or if I miss information, just give the misinformation. Approval of the settlement of the Thompson brothers tax assessment appeal for 2 parcels that we have out there for the Pickering Valley Golf Course. So in the end, it was just a small amount for the difference, and we just decided to do an approval of a settlement. And there's a part of the parcel that also belongs to Great Valley, so I believe that's still not settled, if I'm correct on that. If I'm not, just let me know. Mr. Fazio, I don't know if you can hear me. Number 6 is approval of legal service consultation agreement with Sweet Stevens, Katz, and Williams. This is the law firm that mostly does our special education. So this would be a 1-year agreement for them to continue services with them. And one of the things that they include is training for special ed teachers to update them regarding the special ed laws. So that's something that they include with their pricing, which is helpful for our staff to be up to date. Number 7 is approval of a fee agreement with Belvoir Kelly LLP for legal counsels on any special matters for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year and for 2020-21 school year. And they mostly handle things like our parcel properties, like our ELC property and our farmhouse there. Number 8 is approval of the 2020-2021 Chester County Intermediate Unit Core Services budget. That's just standard that we acknowledge their budget, but this is something that just, is part of our standard approvals. Number 9 is approval of the 2020-2021 Chester County Intermediate Unit Occupational Education budget in also as well. And that's basically it. I don't know if anyone has any questions or nothing very big in finance that I can think of. These are just, a lot of them are just standard things.
Mr. Weiss?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask, and maybe by next week we can have some of them. I know in the personnel report, some of the positions that were listed there were internal, and I was wondering if we were looking to backfill the people who are advancing, I'll say, to newer positions. And I don't know if it's appropriate to go any deeper than that in this forum, so I'm going to leave it at that. I did want to just echo some of the public comment on trying to really get an ETA, an estimated time of arrival of the forensic audit. I believe that it is, when we had our last meeting on that back in the earlier part of February, they were 2 or 3 weeks away at that time. That would have been before the March timeframe, before COVID-19. So we're several weeks past that, and I realize that there's been a disruption due to the virus, but I think we're entitled to know when we can look to see the results of this, because it is, I think it's very important for us to know the results. And the last question that I had is, I've noticed that we have a lot of different solicitors, lawyers, et cetera, firms that work on special areas. And I was wondering if we were truly getting our bang for the buck there. Was there, instead of having maybe 5 or 6 different solicitors, is there a firm that has a broader umbrella that we can look at, that maybe get some efficiencies in scale with, and not just, well, this is what we typically do. I know we're looking at the auditors. Maybe we ought to look at the solicitors too from that perspective. And those are my questions more than specific comments.
Dr. Fagley or Mr. Fazio, could you speak to the attorney side of things in terms of the reason behind having multiple firms for different areas?
Sure. And Mr. Fazio can join in. One of the reasons you have multiple firms, it's like any specialty. If I go to my general doctor, I don't want my general doctor working on my knee, nor do I want them working on my heart. I go to a specialist. And in some cases, that's what you have here. We have a very, very good general firm who knows an awful lot. One of the firms that has been brought in, Sweet Stevens, specializes in special education. That's their area of expertise. That's what they do. So you look at what that is and you say, okay. And honestly, when you look at their rates are less than the general firm. So we could go to the general firm, but this firm specializes in this area and gives us lower rates overall. When we're looking at the Sienna Belvoir recommendation that we have before you, Mr. Belvoir had been with it had been Sienna Belvoir. Mr. Belvoir is breaking off. We had gone with Sienna Belvoir, and specifically with Mr. Belvoir, because of his relationship he had with Schuylkill Township and helping to get the Early Learning Center in Manavon built. And at that time, we felt it was, the board at that point felt that was much more important to get his expertise, because he had worked in the area, he had worked in Chester County, he knew the officials in order to get the job done most efficiently. There's still a few pieces hanging on from that, which includes the eminent domain piece with relationship to the farmhouse. Keeping him on to at least complete that work, I think, is important. And in order to do that, that's why we are recommending that he stay on for that. He also did the lease for the natatorium. So we want to keep that specialization in-house if we need it. We don't use him that much right now, but he is available there. And then we've used other specific negotiations attorneys at times, depending on what we're specifically going for. So it's going for the specialist. You need a good generalist. The board needs good legal counsel. But I think at times the board also needs good counsel that's very specific and hones in on it, on that area of expertise.
I was just looking to make sure that we were with a close eye on the budget in light of everything, making sure that we're getting our best bang for the buck. And if we are, then that's great. I have nothing against any of these firms. I have no negative information on them. It was just kind of a due diligence question.
It's a fair one. When I first arrived in the district, on average, this district was spending between $60,000 and $100,000 a month on legal bills. Right now, we spend somewhere in the area of $5,000 to $14,000. So it is very important that we're looking at the bills. We are looking at the bills very closely, and we're making sure that we have experts that can answer the questions. Sometimes it's better to pay a little bit more for that expert if they get you the answer really precisely than have someone have to go out there and look forever and ever to get you maybe the same answer. That's a good one.
I also, I was hoping maybe Mr. Fazio can answer the question about if he has any updates from the forensic audit firm.
Well, actually, I'll take over that. We will have an executive session on that. Thank you. Any other finance items? Okay. Seeing none, we'll now move on to policy. And just to preview the show, these are all policies we saw last month. This is the second reading of them. Mr. Gore?
Thank you. Starting with 626, the travel reimbursement for federal programs. This is for travel reimbursement specifically for federal grant personnel or recipients. We had basically, I can't say minutia, but basically just wordsmithing, small technical changes for that one. The next one is 903, public participation in board meetings. Some of this was also small technical changes. For example, under authority, we added that at least one period for public participation in the meetings that are applicable. Things like we changed address of a particular participant, someone who was speaking at a public meeting to municipality instead of address. We did that a couple of times throughout it. This again was nothing earth-shattering. 903, just some slight improvements. 905 was also 905. The citizen advisory committees. The bulk of this was the bulk of the changes were made made to make it more streamlined, change the terminology. We did, however, change quorum vote under membership, which is kind of misleading or confusing, to a majority vote, which is where it should have been. Look at things of substance. Under minutes, we added that the minutes should be made available to any board member upon request. And again, the rest of it was, almost the majority of it was technical changes. We changed problems to issues and stuff like that. 911, news media relations. We just reiterated, we just changed the terminology, reiterating how important the media is and the newspapers, etc. So I'm not going to spend any time on that. Also, with a lot of them in the 900s this month, I just realized that. With 913, relations with special interest groups, we changed the preamble to match language that was used in some of the other 900s, basically, or some of the other policies, or with language that said what the purpose of it was, and that was almost exclusively the only change on that. Let me double check that for a second. I'm sorry. Oh no, I'm sorry. We reiterated that student expression distribution of materials was covered by 220, and I think that was the extent of it. Or we changed a superintendent to superintendent or designee, and yeah, we did that actually in two separate. That was the extent of it.
Thank you. Any questions on policy? Seeing none. Next is the secretary report. We have only one new item on there, the March 15th minutes. So I'd encourage everybody to review them. And if you have any questions, send them into Ms. Broker. And finally, we will use.
Madam President, Mrs. Broker said she was still in the process of reviewing the minutes, appreciates any feedback that members have, and will have them ready for next week.
Okay. And then Ms. Reed.
I spoke with Ms. Broker this evening, and I will also be assisting. So if you have something that's blaring, you can send it to both Ms. Broker and me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Reed. Really appreciate it. Next, we'll have district updates. So I will kick off with two updates. One, I'd like to let everybody know that House Bill 974, which is the one I was emailing about this morning, was shot down. So very excited that our legislators were successful. So absolutely want to thank Reps Schusterman and Otten for their hard work and their strong support of public education. It's just greatly appreciated. Second is for the food distribution. I just wanted to do a couple quick updates so that folks in the community know we are giving out food every day of the week for this week and for this week. Starting next week, we will be giving out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. However, for Monday, you would get Monday and Tuesday's food. For Wednesday, you get Wednesday and Thursday's food. For Friday, you get Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you will still be able to receive 7 days worth of food for your students. This includes breakfast and lunch for them. We are also now fortunate to have adult meals. So if there is an adult in the community that does need a meal, they can come to any of our 5 distribution sites, which are Barclay, PAX, Bethel Baptist, TCHS parking lot, and Kmart parking lot from 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. And they can pick up food as well. We are additionally giving out on Fridays first come, first serve, but weekend bags. So a bag full of groceries to support a family in need. So if you have any concerns or needs, please absolutely, when it comes to food, stop by our distribution sites. We can serve anyone. The adult food is through FEMA. This is at no cost to the district. So I want to clarify that point. We've also just had wonderful donations from the community. This past Friday, we served based on donation from Wawa. TD Alfredo's has been doing at-cost hoagies for our students. Hog Island has been giving vouchers for families in need to come and get food. We've just had Uncle B's has been giving out food as well. We've had wonderful support from the community. So just wanted to thank everybody for that. And that is my updates. Dr. Fagley.
Sure. The food distribution, as President Emanuel has stated, has just been absolutely incredible. And if there is anyone at all, and please come to one of these sites and ask for some food. There is food there for you. And if there's an organization out there that says, wait, I have X number of families that we know that need food, please give us a call and we will send food that we have from FEMA over your way. It is important that we make sure everyone gets a meal every day, meals every day in this place. So thank you. I'd like to thank everybody who has been working so hard on getting the food out to the folks. In a recent call that we had with the county, they found Phoenixville, and this is including the borough, Karen Williams and Mayor Urschler, as part of the examples of how they wish food distribution would be going. And it really is heartwarming to know that we're part of that and making sure people are getting their food. The other part that I would have is just a huge, huge thank you. One, to the students, because folks, it has been difficult for you. I had a conversation with high school students today. They talked about how it took time just to get used to working online in the new world that they are in. But they said, you know what, we're getting used to it. We're going to make it. We're stronger together. We're going to get through this all. They had recommendations on how we can keep improving, which is very, very important. And you know what, but that's what makes us great. We do work, we listen, we keep growing in what we're doing and how we're doing it. So thank you, students, for your thoughtful feedback, and thank you for all your hard work. To the faculty, thank you. It's not easy to suddenly take your classroom from a room onto this video screen with the Brady Bunch and sit here and lead classes. And yet you've done really, really well at making that churn, making the change and going there. To the support staff, thank you for coming in and working with the students that you support online through Zoom. Our therapists are doing their therapy online. It really, really is amazing. To the administrative team, I have to tell you, I've never seen a harder working team. They've been going above and beyond to find resources for folks, to make sure that people have what they need, and then going out and finding how to pay for it. So you just can't beat the team that's been there. And as I already said, to the maintenance, custodial staff, and tech staff, holy cow. You know how much work it takes to distribute 500 computers and Kajits and everything else, and then fix them and keep it going. Incredible. And then the custodial and maintenance staff, as I walk around the buildings, they're there. They're happy to be there. They're happy to be getting this work done, getting a head start on what they know they would need to do in the summer anyway, and actually being able to take it to a new level. And that's what's so exciting, being able to take things to the next level. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to the parents for understanding. I can't imagine how difficult your job is right now. You've suddenly been put in the role of caretaker, sitter, 24/7, and that is not easy. So thank you for all that you're doing during this time. We hope we'll be back together soon. We want to be back together soon. We're in the process of making plans to be back together this summer. If we're not, we'll have virtual plans ready to go, and we're making plans to be back together in the fall. And very, very hopeful we'll be there, but we're certain that there will be changes that we have to do in our operations in the process. And as we learn what they are, we'll keep you informed.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss.
I have a ask for Dr. Fagley for next week. Last month, we voted to provide some extra funds if needed. One for technology and one for food. And I was wondering if for next week you can kind of let us know how we did on that or where we are with that.
Give you a quick update now even. Thank you for the reminder. So on the food, as you heard, PCF has raised $50,000 to help. And that is an incredible amount of money. Last week alone, they helped supply over $2,500 worth of grocery cards for folks. But we have not touched the food money at all yet. While we have touched the monies for the wireless systems and computers, right now, Mr. Fazio is doing the right thing by having us keep full records of it. And we expect that right now will all be reimbursed to the district. So I would say right now, I don't believe that in the end, you're going to see cost to the district on those because it looks like through the federal programs, we will be able to get full reimbursement. But I thank the board for giving us that option because we just could not wait. We had to move, we had to place those orders. So thank you. But at this point, I don't believe that you'll see those funds being used in the near future.
Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, at this point, we will move to the budget report. And Dr. Fagley and Mr. Fazio.
Okay, thank you very much. I am going to share my screen. And I believe at this point, everyone should see the budget presentation up on the screen. So the last time we talked budget, believe it or not, was back in February, the end of February. And at that point, we were going through a budget. We were showing a 2.6% increase. Now, I have to tell you, at that time, I was feeling really good about where the budget was going to go. Revenues were looking strong. Mr. Fazio and Ms. Rockwood were working hard on the various items, especially personnel, and we're bringing the costs down. I hate to say it this way to the board because it's not kind of where we're at right now, but at that point, I'm sitting there going, yes, we'll be able to come in less than 2.6. There's no doubt about it. As we all know, things have really, really changed in the last 6 weeks. Our new projections on earned income tax, just so you have a quick sense, are down 11% for next year. Our interest earnings are down by 50%. And to put that in perspective, that takes it from $800,000 down to $400,000 of interest earned. So we are hitting a new reality. And this is a much more challenged budget. With that, though, I want to thank Mr. Fazio and Mrs. Rockwood for doing an amazing job at looking at the numbers and working with all the administrative team to come up with a recommendation for the board's consideration and review starting this evening. With that, though, I will turn it over to Mr. Fazio to go into a little bit more about the physical consequences of COVID-19. Fazio?
Thank you, Dr. Fegley. Good evening, board and community. I'd like to, as I was preparing and practicing the presentation, I realized, unfortunately, it's a pretty depressing presentation tonight. Not that budget presentations are exciting, but this one has some depressing tone. But there is some silver lining to it, and I'll talk about that in a second. But obviously, COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on not only the world, nationally and locally. This presentation will talk about the impact it has not only on the budget that you'll be voting on hopefully next week and next month, but the impact to date on the 1920 budget. It's funny. I've been preparing budgets for about 27 years, and I always struggle with the expenditure side of the budget, not as much on the revenue side, because the revenues are typically based on history, but nowhere in history or recent history can we go back and see see the impact of COVID-19. So the revenues are more of an uncertainty than the expenditure side. And as Dr. Fegley had mentioned earlier tonight, the administration, the staff, custodians, maintenance are doing everything possible to minimize the impact of COVID-19 on both budgets. We'll not meet our target budget on investment income. Actually, I checked that today just prior to the meeting, and just preparing for this. Our budget for interest income last year or this year was $500,000. We're actually, as of today, have interest income of $486,000. So there's to talk about some silver lining. The economy was so robust from July to January and mid-February. I'm optimistic on investment income being on budget for this year. But as Dr. Fegley mentioned, next year we've cut that expectation in half. Earned income taxes. The problem is we may not realize earned income tax revenue until normally we see the big increase right around now, and for the next couple of weeks, when we had to file our taxes on April 15th, but because of the delay, we won't see that income probably until July. We are, as the board and hopefully the community is aware, that Act 13 required all school districts in the state of Pennsylvania to compensate all employees, no more, no less, had COVID-19 not occurred, irrespective of if there is work available or if work is being performed. We are required to pay our charter schools. both bricks and mortar and cyber, based on enrollment in those schools as of March 13th through the end of the year, irrespective of the fact that those children may not be attending classes. We are required to compensate our bus contractors at full compensation in order to receive our full subsidy for transportation next year. Dr. Fagley alluded to that. We're in negotiations with our contractor as we speak about that subsidy payment or that payment for this school year. We are required to reimburse all the intermediate units that we send children to as if they had provided services throughout the year. And we've incurred significant additional costs in the area of technology to provide educational services remotely to our students. But again, as Dr. Fagley mentioned, we're keeping track of all those expenses, and hopefully we'll be reimbursed for those. FAPE, free and education. Appropriate. Regarding our special ed students, we're anticipating some challenges next year, and many school districts are increasing their budget line item for legal expenses because of that. Full state subsidies for the remainder of 1920 and obviously 2021 are not a certainty. Measures taken, again, as Dr. Fagley mentioned, energy conservation measures implemented March 13th, effective with the shutdown. As of today, prior to the meeting tonight, we got a report, 72%, and that's a big compliment to Mr. Gibson and Phil, who works for Ken. They've done a tremendous job reducing energy consumption overall in the district. All non-essential spending was stopped a week or two ago, so no purchase orders or requisitions unless approved by the superintendent. And then again, any payments to any vendors are double checked by me and then by Dr. Fagley as well. No extra duty compensation or overtime are allowed unless approved by two cabinet members. And we have a number of grants outstanding and that have been applied for. If I could just talk about this, the Act 1 index, which is 2.6 for this year being next year's budget, 2021. The Act 1 index for next year will come out in September of this year, and it was projected to be 3.2, but obviously COVID-19 will impact that, and there's some thought that may be cut in half, as much as 50% reduction. So I just want to caution the board, but that not only will we face a difficult time budgetarily for the 2021 school year, but the 21-22 school year will be impacted by COVID-19 as well. State subsidies could be impacted. The state of PA is facing this was a week or two ago with almost a $4 billion deficit. We've taken our subsidy projections down from what was released when the governor released his budget to level funding for as same as last year. And that's a foregone conclusion. EIT taxes, investment revenue, and Again, PSER's rate expected to climb as much as 6%. So every employee who's hired, there'll be a 40% impact as a result of PSER's. It's important to note that we're reimbursed 50% of that, but the net impact of a 1% increase is about 190, almost $200,000 on the district.
Mr. Fazio, can you pause for one moment? Mr. Weiss.
Yeah, Mr. Fazio, I had a question on the previous slide on the investment revenue will be impacted. I was wondering if you can comment on the refinancing of bonds that we were looking at and how that might play along with that bullet there of the investment revenue impacts or the plan.
Good question. Yep, great question, Mr. Weiss. You'll see on probably the final slide of the evening, we've been working with bond counsel, our underwriters, our financial advisor, and we have a sensitivity analysis of obviously the market changes daily, but we're still projecting about a $4 million savings. That's $4 million of savings to the district by refinancing our debt. And we're confident, I guess, if that's too strong of a word, but we're very comfortable that we'll realize and take into consideration about $650,000 of that $4 million. That $4 million is going to be spread over a number of years, but we're anticipating about a $650,000 reduction in our debt service in next year's budget. Collective bargaining discussions may occur with contract modifications, a certainty for many districts. Many districts have already have approached their unions for concessions to assist with the budget. Business bankruptcies, more vacant commercial property, increase in tax appeals, delayed real estate tax payments. Again, this is a new world that we're living in. And unemployment, it'll certainly decrease from the current levels, but it'll be much higher than the single-digit unemployment that we were experiencing just 3 months ago.
Okay, at this point, we're going to turn over to Mrs. Rockwood.
Thank you. So I want to just start with this first slide, which will give you an overview of the budget information that you've already heard and was presented to you back in the preliminary budget by Mr. Fazio. So you can see this is a comparison with salaries. In the preliminary budget, there was a salary figure of $39,400,000. We've done a pretty detailed analysis, and we believe that number we can get that to about $37,700,000. And that's with a 1.5% or a 0% tax increase. And we'll talk about that in more detail. But regardless of whether the board chooses to raise taxes to 1.5 or 0, which are two of the budget presentations we'll be presenting, salaries would be $37,700,000. Benefits you see has gone up a little bit since the benefits were presented in the preliminary budget in January. So they've gone up about 5%. And that's after getting the most recent rate increase projections from our broker and looking at a number of other factors. But this number is probably the most accurate number that we can present at a 1.5 or a 0% tax increase for a total of salary and benefits of $62 million. So I want to talk about the breakdown and how we got to those numbers a little bit. So I'll start with benefits. As I mentioned, we recently met with our insurance broker, and one of the major drivers, obviously, of our benefit costs is our health insurance. And we are budgeting for an 8.49% increase in the cost of our health insurance benefits. And that actually relates to about a $585,000 increase in dollars over last year's expenditures. And some of the major drivers of this increase and what we look at when we try to budget for benefits increases is our claim history. So our broker looks closely at our claim history and where we may go in the future based on our current population. We also know that we have significant increases in our stop loss insurance. And just a reminder, stop loss is insurance that we carry as a self-insured organization. We pay our claims as they come in. And so therefore we take stop loss insurance to guard against really, really high claims. So we have a $250,000 deductible. And because we have some extremely high claimants, that insurance cost has gone up. And so that's also driving the rate of our health insurance increase. And as you'll see in a couple slides from now, I have a chart that shows you some of the increases in our prescription drugs and our specialty drugs. And we've all heard of the national trends in prescription drug increases, and certainly we're feeling that here in Phoenixville. That's also driving up some of our stop loss rates because some of our high claimants are related to very, very high drug claims and these specialty drugs. And as Mr. Fazio already mentioned, we know our PSERS rate is 34.51. So those are two of our major costs. Obviously, you see PSERS at the top there at 13 million. Health overall, and this number includes our medical, prescription, vision, dental, all of those costs combined, 7.7 million. Our Social Security, this encompasses all of our payroll taxes, and then other, that general category. This is where we budget for tuition reimbursement and contractual payments we make to 403Bs and tax sheltered annuities and so on. So the total benefits at 24.5 million. So I wanted to take a second. You can see this just graphically represents those numbers I went over. I think it's always nice to kind of see where the bulk of the money is. We know it's PSERS and health, with those other two smaller categories making up the difference. This slide, again, is a graphical representation of our medical claims. And PCPM is the average cost per contract per month. So this is how much we spend on every person that we have a contract with, whether that's a family or an employee with a family or a single employee who has just covering themselves. This shows you the trend of our coverage starting in July 2017. And the purpose of this slide is to show you kind of the trend line that the district has had just with medical claims. It's gone up, it's a dip down. And around those years following 2017 into 2018, the district saw much smaller rate increases. 18-19, our rate increases increased fairly dramatically. The district raised health insurance benefits by 10%, and that's where you see this high peak. That's dropped, but we're leveling off a little bit, and you can see where we are averaging about a little over $900 per contract per month. The next slide, though, is really alludes to the point I made earlier about prescription drugs. So, you saw our medical claims. This is hospitalizations and, people just going to the doctor. This shows our drug claims. And so the cost of prescription drugs and specialty drugs has increased dramatically. So an average per contract per month cost of $200, we're now hovering around $350. And again, this is what's driving our rate increases. And in some ways, this is also driving our stop loss insurance rate increases as well. This slide, I just want to take a second and it's always good to know how are we comparing to our neighbors who are really operating in the same healthcare market. So we are individually self-insured as a district. We do, under our broker, we do have some consortium rate pricing related to our administrative costs for health insurance. So this shows you a trend for Phoenixville compared to that group of area school districts in Chester County. So we, starting in 2014, the far left of this chart, we're the bar that has the red tip. And you can see that that red tip is lower than the pink tip next to us in 2014-15. So we had lower costs than the rest of that consortium. And that trend continued in 15-16, 16-17, we were significantly lower than the rest of the consortium. And you saw that dip in the medical claims. But now if you look at 18-19, the very last two columns, the red tip or Phoenixville is up above where the rest of the consortium is. And again, this is continuing to drive our rate increases.
I'm sorry, Ms. Rockwood, before you continue, a couple folks wanted to jump in. Ms. Reed?
Thank you, Ms. Emanuel. Ms. Rockwood, my question is, and I think this is the appropriate, anyway, my question is, I have worked at a firm before, a school firm actually, that would not let people have insurance through the school if they could obtain insurance through their significant other, through their spouse, through a different way. Is that something that is in the contract with Phoenixville area teachers?
We do not currently have that spousal carve out. It's generally referred to as. This district in our current contracts have something similar, but it's actually, we pay employees to opt out of our insurance. So we have an opt-out payment rather than an exclusion.
Thank you.
And Mr. Weiss?
Yes, I'd like to ask Ms. Rockwell, couple of slides back where you had the PISA's rate, you had that at 34.51, and Mr. Fazio said there's a strong likelihood it's going to be around 40%. I was wondering, should we really be using 34.5? Should we use a higher number in this budget exercise so we don't get caught in a surprise situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I believe, we know that the rate for next year will be 35.51. I believe Mr. Fazio is referring to future trends. So following years, the rate is anticipated to rise into the 40s. And so that's just part of future planning at this point. So for this budget year, for 2021, we know that rate is going to be 34.51, and we'll know what the following year's rates will be. I believe, Mr. Fazio, December, is that correct?
December, correct.
Thank you.
Okay, that was not the impression I got by listening. That was a futuristic number.
So I want to talk briefly about healthcare reserves. Again, as I mentioned, we're a self-insured organization, which means that we pay an administrative fee to Independence Blue Cross, but every single claim and every single cost of going to the doctor or being hospitalized, those bills come to the school district and we pay them directly to Independence Blue Cross. Based on that, obviously, we have to have a reserve. And it's important that we have strong reserves for a number of reasons. So the second bullet point there speaks to what's called terminal liability. And this is how recommendations are made for self-insured entities to know how much reserve should you have. And terminal liability refers to the amount of reserves that you should have, certainly if you're going to leave your health insurance company. So claims are being accrued, people are going to the doctor, people are being hospitalized, and by the time those bills reach us, we know that we need a lag period to make sure we have the money in the bank to pay them. So when we look at what the recommended healthcare reserve is for Phoenixville, Our most recently calculated terminal liability, which represents 60 days of reserves, is $1 million. And the recommendation for the overall reserve, so the amount that you really want to have in healthcare reserve, is 6 months. For Phoenixville, based on our claim history, that's just slightly over $3 million. And it's important to point out here that currently we have 1.1 million in reserves. So as you can see there, that's only 37% of our recommended reserve that we should have, which would last us, just a little over 2 months of claims. That's how much that would cover. So that's certainly a concern, and certainly something that the board wants to keep in mind, and the district budgeting. So I wonder if there's Mr. Weiss, do you have an additional question before I move on to salary?
I just wanted to ask then, when we move further into the presentation, will we see something for the reserves, or is that just a caution for us that if we do nothing, we're sitting at that 37% of the recommended amount?
Yes. Yes, that's where we currently sit. I think with this current budget, and I'll let Mr. Fazio go into more detail about all of the expenditures and where everything is budgeted to go. I don't believe that right now there is anticipation to put any additional monies in those reserves based on the state of our budget right now. It's been at slightly over 1 million, so this isn't a completely new state of being for our healthcare reserve, but I do think it's important to point out to the board to let you know what the state of our overall benefits management is.
And just to add one piece to that, while it might not be in the budget, it is something we can consider come the official time to vote. And obviously, we've done it historically, and obviously this year's completely different. But for example, last year we added 200,000 to the reserves as a separate amendment after the proposed budget. So during the voting point in that May meeting, whenever it was, somebody put forth an amendment to add 200,000 to the healthcare reserve. So it's certainly something that anybody could do at any point during the voting process for the budget. Just wanted to put that out there.
So moving on to salary. What I wanted to do here is to just show where the salary budgets are according to function. We've had a lot of discussion or some discussion about the chart of accounts and how we account for every expenditure and every budget item. And so I wanted to show all of the different functions that occur in this district, starting with the 1100s. That's regular education instruction. So every regular education teacher salary is budgeted in the 1100 function. Obviously, that's our mission, and clearly that's where the bulk of our budget goes, 19 million. You see special education at 5.6 million, and so on. As you look down through all of the functions where salaries are budgeted, you will see the total there. And all the way down to the very bottom of the 3200s, this is our student activities, which includes athletics, activities, clubs. So all of those salaried amounts that we pay people to do various work in providing service to the district, for the total of our 37,700,000. On the next slide, you will see the same exact salary broken out by object. And this would be the second part of the full account code for all salaries. And this is what really the job assignment. So the 110s are all administrators at 3.4 million, 120s. Again, the bulk of our expenditures obviously are for our teachers at 26 million, and so on at the bottom there, all the way through office clerical, operative labor, and then our instructional assistants at 1.9. So I wanted to go back to the presentations that were made at the very start of the budget presentations, all related to the strategic plan. And we went through every single presentation to make sure we captured all of these staffing recommendations that came out of the discussions in building the budget around the strategic plan. So I'm going to focus, and all the staffing really fell into those first three categories. So I'm going to go through each strategic goal and talk about the staffing recommendations and where we are with this current budget. So first, strategic goal number one, allocating resources to foster excellence for all students. These were all budget items that the board was presented with, and these things have been discussed. Some are slightly more fleshed out and have a little bit more detail to them. For example, the very first one is a Barkley fourth grade teacher. This was related to enrollment growth. So obviously, when we have enrollment growth, we need to make sure our resources are allocated appropriately. The recommendation at a 2.6 was to add a Barkley teacher, and that recommendation remains at any other level of tax increase with this budget. We feel that that's a critical position. And one of the determinations that we made clearly was looking pretty closely at class size. So while we know that our enrollment is growing, we also feel that there may be a need at Manavon second grade, but without adding a fourth grade position at Barkley, we know that class size will exceed the board policy guidelines. Without adding the Manavon second grade teacher, which you see is the second line there, and you can see that's 0 at a 1.5 or 0. We know that class size will be very, very close to, if not at the max, which is certainly not ideal. Obviously, any new kids coming in will push that number up, but we feel that the greatest need is at Barkley, and considering the resources that we would have at a 1.5, that's the recommendation. In addition, the next position that we would continue to recommend at a 1.5 is the ELD teacher for our English language learners. It's a growing population, and the needs continue to grow there, and we want to continue to support that need. Next is the controller. We would continue to make that recommendation as well to support the business office. The next two lines there, we have our multiple disability support teacher. That was a discussion, and it was mentioned in the preliminary budget after considerable thought and care by the special education leaders. They feel that transfer from Schuylkill will cover that need. So there's no budgetary need there. And we also know that we have a number of retiring teachers. By not replacing 4 of those, we would not have to expend that $200,000. So that's an area that we will be reducing at a 1.5 or 0.
Ms. Soto, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, regarding the $200,000 for the teachers, I was just wondering, why is there a cost if they're retiring? Wouldn't we just be replacing their salary with new employees?
Yeah, this would actually be a bit of a savings to the budget if we did not replace them.
But if they were to, we're already paying these teachers. So if they were to leave and we were to hire 4 new teachers, wouldn't it just be a wash?
It would be, but this money was actually taken out of the budget to get to the 37.7. So when we took all of the salaries and we removed these 4 salaries, instead of replacing 4 teachers at a cost, at the entry level cost of $200,000, we took that money out to get to the 37 million at the 1.5 or 0.
Mr. Weiss?
Ms. Rockwell, very well explained the factor of class size in some of these decisions. I was wondering if there were other major factors, and maybe Dr. Fagley can join in on this one. I realize these are very, very hard decisions, and it was just kind of looking at process of what were the major factors as the team went through painstakingly looking at all of the different positions to derive at these recommendations?
Yeah, I can tell you that we had many meetings over the last several months with the entire administrative team. So we met with every building leader, talking about their individual needs at the building level. And then we certainly met and brought all of those recommendations together as the list evolved. More importantly, as we got class size information, and that was refined, we got course selection information. The secondary principals started building what their master schedules will look like and the classes that may or may not run. So all of those factors went into consideration. And then we took all of those recommendations and requests and thoughts. The cabinet looked very closely at every single one to come up with these recommendations.
Thank you.
Welcome. So the next strategic plan goal, promote employee growth and effectiveness. We had a number of goals here and focused on curriculum. Certainly, as we've all seen recently, this is the heart of any good school district. Our goal was to replace a curriculum supervisor positions that had been in the budget and to continue to grow our very successful instructional coach program in the curriculum department. Based on a 1.5 or 0% tax increase, we are recommending filling a curriculum supervisor position, one instead of two, and we would not have the resources to fill or to hire 2 additional coaches. So strategic plan goal 3, providing high quality instruction. A goal that we talked about in the strategic plan was continuing to support music and adding in additional strings. The goal was to increase a 0.8 music teacher to a full-time music position, which would be an additional approximately $20,000. So that would not be included in a 1.5 or 0. Other curricular areas that we were hoping to expand were middle school math, and then both secondary STEM. So adding, increasing our STEM program up through 6 through 12. So the recommendations at a 1.5 or 0 would be to continue to recommend adding an additional middle school math position for that targeted support improvement, and add the additional high school STEM position, but not the middle school. And the next slide shows you the summary of everything that I just went over. So all of those positions, all of those budget recommendations with the goals. So at a 2.6, we were looking at a $996,000 salary difference. At a 1.5 or 0, it's $398,000 increase. And now if there's no more questions, I will turn it back over to Mr. Fazio to review the rest of the budget presentation.
Thanks, Sylvia. Great job. What I've attempted to do here is show you 3 different versions of a 2021 final budget, and you'll see that revenues were impacted by about $1.5 million. As Dr. Fagley had mentioned, back in January and February, we were feeling pretty good that not that it was going to be an easy budget year, but we were pretty confident that the way revenues had looked with our work on expenditures, that we'd be able to add to our reserves and address all our needs. And then COVID-19 hit, and you'll see a number of adjustments, modifications to revenues. The first, the positive impact, if you will, is in earlier presentations I alluded to how Phoenixville was growing, and we're the second largest assessment growth, or second largest district in Chester County to have significant assessment growth. We're only Great Valley is ahead of us, and so we saw you'll see about $700,000 of assessment growth from December and till now, and they just released the most current numbers. So that's the most recent estimate on assessed value and the impact of tax increase. The earned income tax, again, down by 11%. We don't think that there'll be an impact on delinquent taxes. Occupational tax, the head tax, the $10 tax. While we anticipate some potential decrease in that, it'll be offset by the full collection rate, as opposed to turning some of those funds over to the borough. Interest income, you'll see last year we received $739,000 actual. This year we're at, as I said, right now we're at almost $500,000, but we're taking that number down to 400, cutting it in half from our early estimates. And the rest of the budget line items for revenues pretty stable, not much impact. I do want to point out or ask the board, we did increase school rentals, and that's to reflect our rental policy. I know that there's been times when the board has made some concessions, but it's always it's been my experience once you make give a concession to one community group, that opens up the door to other community groups. So I'm asking if the board could hold true to its policy and not make as many concessions going forward with rental income. State revenues, we've taken that down. As you can see, they're really at this year's level or less. So we're not projecting the same increase that the governor had told us what it would be just 2 months ago. So we've taken that down. We've basically asked or suggested level funding for our two largest income sources, basic ed and special ed. Transportation, we have made an adjustment there, and that was to speak to an earlier slide. In order to get full funding, we would have to pay our contractors as if they provided service throughout the year to cover all their fixed costs, including salaries. We're struggling with, on one hand, we would lose about $400,000 of revenue, but in order to gain that $400,000 of revenue, we would have to pay our contractors approximately $1 million. So there's some question on exactly if that's in the best interest of Phoenixville. Social Security and PSERS are purely a function of salaries, and taxpayer relief is an in and out, and then other sources of revenue, state revenue. Federal revenues, we don't get a lot of money, and we don't anticipate them being impacted. So the three different scenarios you can see from the preliminary that was presented in February, we're at 98.2, and in no scenario are we close to that. So in option one, I had a 2.6% increase. We're at 96.8. At a 1.5% increase, we're at $96 million, and at no tax increase, we're at 95. On the expense side, you'll see the numbers that Sylvia presented, with respect to salaries and benefits. And then an earlier question, you'll see debt service was taken down to reflect the savings on the anticipated refinancing. As I go through, you'll see some changes like curriculum instruction. It's not that there was no curriculum instruction, in the 1920 budget or in my preliminary. I just cut the pie differently. I had some of those things in all other. The school budgets, I want to point that out. The school budgets, we had at $1.4 million. What we've done since then is copier leases, for example, were in school budgets, as well as substitute teachers were budgeted by the schools, and we pulled those out, the subs separately, and the copier leases are in the technology portion of the budget. So going back up, special ed, Mrs. Lynn has done a tremendous job with this special ed budget, as well as Dr. Ramsey. Charter schools, significant savings from the previous budget, but that's purely based on enrollment. What we're not reflecting an increase in charter school enrollment, nor are we reflecting a decrease. We've budgeted at the rate that the children are there now. We hope to bring back more children. And if we do, there should be a savings there. Transportation, we're fully staffed in transportation office, and we have some good people working there, and they're looking for efficiencies in our transportation routing. Maintenance, there's a slight reduction from Mr. Gibson's original budget, and we've asked him to go back and tighten up the budget as much as possible. Technology, the same. There's that copier lease and some increased hardware needs in technology. But the rest, the library, student activities, athletics, there's no contingency budgeted at this point. We still we feel confident. When I mentioned the silver lining, I think the silver lining in this presentation is I feel strongly or very confident that our revenues will, for the 1920 school year, will overall will meet or exceed the budget, even given the depressed earned income tax and probably not a lot more in interest income. But we're at about 90% of our target right now. We're about $10 million short of the $90 million in this year's budget, but about 8 million of the 10 million is state revenues, Social Security, PSERS, basic ed, special ed funding. So there's a high degree of probability that we'll receive those funds from the state because they were promised last year. And the other is earned income taxes. We're short of the budget right now by about $2.4 million. But again, the largest will come in when people file their taxes for last calendar year. So I'm pretty confident that revenues will come in, meet or exceed budget, and expenditures, there will be savings in different expenditure lines. So we're anticipating a stronger than anticipated fund balance, which we could use as contingency funding or assisting with our reserves or fortifying our reserves. So it's the administration's recommendation to meet in that middle ground at that 1.5% tax increase. We gave a lot of consideration to a lower or lesser amount for a tax increase. The issue there is the more we cut, the more into the bone, if you will, the more it affects children and education, and we didn't feel comfortable doing that. Coupled with the fact that the next school year could present some challenges too. So if the board was so inclined to vote, as Mrs. Soto alluded to, voting on the proposed final budget next Monday night to advertise it, there'll still be modifications, there'll still be significant modifications done between now and the final vote. The budget has to rest with the public for their consumption for 30 days. And sometime in late May, the board would hopefully adopt the budget.
So just to be clear, would that give us a chance to review things, to do the red, yellow, and see what, things that could go, possibly go into the green, or the back and forth with that?
There'll be, I believe we have another budget presentation scheduled, but again, the administration will be refining the budget, and the board is welcome to make any modifications that they so desire.
So we, as a board, you'll be able to lower the budget from that point. You won't be able to raise the budget from that point. So you may want to sit there and say proposed final a little bit higher than you think it may be. Certainly not, don't put it much lower if you don't think you ever want to go there. So just trying to give you the sense, but yes, it's looking at it. So you could put in some contingency funds, say we want to put 250,000 in contingency funds. That could raise the budget up from whatever figure it is by another 0.2, 0.3%. In the end, we may come back and say, hey, we can do something here, or you may say, no, we're not going to do that much contingency. And again, it could go lower than the proposed amount, just not higher than the proposed amount.
This vote next week is very similar to the vote we did for the prelim budget in January. So it's not binding our hands from doing things outside of going higher than the tax increase in which we agreed to. So Ms. Reed.
We can't have the budget. I know the budget needs to be done by June because they need to send out tax bills or when we're going to send them out. How does this work? We just don't know. No one's gonna give me an answer because nobody knows, right? Thank you.
For what it's worth, it's not just tax bills. It is actually PA code that our budget has to be passed by June 30th.
I was wondering if they had extended that, but it wouldn't matter because it still needs to go out for the tax bills. But also, again, whether or not we have a school, but who knows? We will have school, but whether or not we are in the buildings. So I'm frustrated. Everyone's frustrated. Thank you for your time.
No worries. And so that hasn't been extended as of yet.
Right.
And that vote that I was talking about earlier was the amendment proposing that there be a 0% Act 1 for this year. And that was shot down in the House just, 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago. I don't know what time we're at. So, yep. So Mr. Fazio, were you?
Mr. Weiss has his hand up.
Oh, it's not showing up. I apologize.
It's okay.
Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, ma'am. Have three questions. I noticed that folks have tightened their belts and have done a good job of that. I realize that's painful, but I noticed that student activities and athletics were not asked to tighten their belts any different than the previous year's budget. Is there any consideration to a challenge to them for, I don't know, some type of percent decrease in their funding, realizing that it is not one of the drivers to the overall budget, but every little bit helps. That was number one. And number two, Mr. Fazio alluded to some potential for, I'll say, leftover money from 2019-2020 budget to roll over in some capacity to the next year's budget. I was wondering if he had a feel or a ballpark. Are we talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, $25? Just kind of a ballpark on that. And I guess lastly, I think in upcoming meetings, we said we had 2 more budget meetings in May. They're still on the schedule, even if we vote next week to go on. So that was just a clarification question.
That is true. That is correct. They're still on.
Mr. Way, with respect to your first question on athletics and student activities, I'll be honest. When it came to student activities and support of the schools, my premise going in was to keep the funding level because that's what touches the students the most. The student activities, the field trips, the clubs, things like that. But athletics, there was a request for increased funding for the athletic program. We kept it flat. Could we revisit that? Probably, but for example, a 10% reduction in athletics is probably only $15,000. 10% would, I think, would be a significant blow to that area of the budget. So there wasn't a lot of bang for the buck, if you will, in my estimation. There, I didn't focus a lot of attention, quite honestly. With respect to what I think the fund balance will be, I think I'll have a clearer picture. Probably at the May budget hearings. I'm pretty confident that there's a lot of positive things happening, fiscally, that we're doing to reduce expenditures. But I think it's premature to put a number on that. But okay, it'll certainly be higher than the past several years.
Okay. I guess I have one more ask, and I don't know if this needs to be a motion, and Madam President, you'll correct me if I'm not doing this properly. It seems that with the board, with the administration's, recommendation of the 1.5, I'm kind of wondering, since we looked at 3 budgets up to now and the 2.6 seems to been fading into the sunset, if you will, for lack of a better term, I guess I would like to see what it would look like if we did a 1% tax increase, because there's a big difference between 1.5 and 0, and whether there's another middle ground to be had. I don't know how much more bone we would be looking at, or the feasibility of that, but maybe by one of the May meetings, that would be something that would be valuable to look at. Just
That would not need a motion. That would just need the majority of the board requesting it. So what I would recommend is speaking with fellow board members or seeing if there's a majority now or, coming back to the table. But the majority of the board could request seeing that as well. I would echo a little bit of concern just in the amount of work that it would take based on the numbers we have. But again, I'm one of 9. So if 5 or more wanted to see a 1%, we could certainly ask that of administration. What I would ask though is to the administration, how much time would you need to provide that? If it was requested, how much time would you need to put that together? Or is it even feasible?
I would say May 4th would be the early date. I don't see us having something new completely by next week.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Reed.
This is more a general statement, but since we're talking about the budget, I'm going to take it. I do not see, someone's called me an alarmist, but I do not see movement outside the district, even if the children are in school for next year. Why I'm saying this is because I would like to know what the public would think about that. I am not okay sending, right now my child anywhere, let alone next year. I would not put them on buses to go anywhere. And I would like to hear what the public thinks about that, because that would make a difference in regards to the budget.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Caltagirone.
To Mr. Weiss's point, and I don't know that we need an entire outlay of a 1% budget. I think what might be helpful is a simple number that would say, here's the difference between a 1.5 and a 1. If it's $200,000 less, if it's $300,000, whatever that number is, right, off of the 95,989, that brings it down to 1% from 1.5, then you have your answer. We can all look at the numbers and say, okay, it's X number, it's X $100,000. If you're going to cut, that's where we're going to cut. I don't think making the district go, or the administration go through a whole exercise of creating another scenario for a 0.5% is of value so much as it is to say, here's how much more would have to be cut, and this is where you're going to be.
Thank you. Ms. Soto.
I think Mr. Caltagirone pretty much said what I was thinking. With the 1%, whether if we can just maybe understand what it would take to go from that 0.5%, where would you possibly can see where you can have some more additional cost savings, and what would be the ramifications of those? I'm just concerned. I know we're already super tight. There's a lot of question about what's going to happen next year. And, I would love a 0%, tax increase in this time right now. I really would. But I'm afraid at what cost this might affect our students and making sure that we have the staff that we need. I think that's basically it.
Mr. Weiss?
Part of the reason why I asked that question was when I looked at the slides on staffing, they were exactly the same for a 1.5% tax increase and a 0% tax increase. So when I saw that, I said, well, okay, the staffing part's known. I don't anticipate that changing. And I could be wrong. Dr. Fagley and Ms. Rockwell and the other staff could come up with something different. But that was part of the rationale of asking the question. But thank you for entertaining it.
If I could just speak to that, the only while the salary number is the same for scenario 2 and scenario 3, the struggle would be it's not balanced for scenario 3. There's essentially a $900,000 deficit to get to a zero. So significant cuts would have to be made potentially to salaries, or someone else or somewhere else in the budget to present a zero.
Thank you. I think that's a really important point. The 900,000 deficit paints a much different picture than the balanced budget, because we are obligated to ultimately pass a balanced budget. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the budget?
I would think, just for time's sake, just because I know time is limited between now and next week, if we wanted staff to look at 1%, then I think now would be the time to say so, instead of waiting, because I don't think we have much time in reviewing this.
Well, what we could do, I mean, I think the idea of knowing what that 5% difference is makes sense. For next week, we just need to vote on one of the budgets. If we vote on the 1.5, that still gives us the option to go down to 1 when we do our final vote in May. Does that make sense? So we can for next week pass the 1.5 and continue to look at it with, depending on how the majority of the board feels in which direction, et cetera, et cetera. But for next week, just getting that, what is that 5% difference number to us?
So do we agree on the 1.5 then? Because I think that's important to have some consensus so we know what that vote will look like.
So Mr. Weiss?
I was just going to ask what the process would be to give administration the time for the 4th of May, if and I realize even that's going to be an effort. I guess I'd like to find a process that will give them that direction, or not give them that direction fairly quickly, like either tonight or maybe tomorrow. I don't know how best to do that. I'll leave that to you, Madam President.
Thanks. Dr. Serini, you have a question, comment?
Yes, I would like to have the additional information, and I just would like to remind everyone that we have ample time to approve this. I believe it's not due until the end of June. Naturally, we don't want to wait till the last minute, but I think that having the additional information and also waiting and not rushing and waiting to see what happens with the economy and everything else that's going on in the external environment is essential. So I say that we wait and gather and sit and have sufficient information and then vote. So I'm in favor of waiting and having additional information. Thank you.
My only concern with our initial vote that's scheduled for next week is that we do need to allow the public 30 days with the proposed budget prior to the official vote. So if we push that off, we can't push it off past the 27th, because that would take us, it'd have to be before the 30th to be in compliance. So that would be my only concern. I understand pushing back the rest of the discussion. Just want to make sure that one piece is covered. Ms. Soto.
One last thing, I think it's clear that we should get an idea of what would be the latest. I know it may say June 30th, but I know that there are some factors that do have to be taken into account. For example, staffing for next year and things like that. So if we could just have an idea, I mean, ideally it's usually middle of May, and there's a reason for that. So maybe some clarity for our new members so they could understand a little bit more on why we aim for that time.
Dr. Fegley, did you want to speak to that?
Sure. One of the reasons we like to try to have a reasonable sense of the budget is when you're going out to do any hiring, and granted, we're not going to do much hiring this year, but the earlier you are able to go out, the overall better the quality of the candidate that you're going to find, because other districts are going out at the same time, and we're all interviewing the same pot. And so we do like to try to get out earlier rather than later on the interview process. in order to get the very best candidates, have the best pool possible.
Thank you. Ms. Reed.
For clarity, we are not if we were to vote next week, we are not voting on the budget. We are voting on a proposed tax rate. So we could still vote at 2.6 and have people upset with us. But if we say 2.6, we can still come back with a 0% increase.
Correct. That's
not ideal.
Thank you.
But we're not
Right.
voting on a budget. We're voting on a potential tax increase that we've already voted on. Thank you.
Correct.
Thank you. That's a great clarification. Dr. Serini.
Thank you. Ms. Reed, the last part of what you just said cut out on my end. So can you just say what?
Of course,
that
thank you.
last-
We've already voted on this once, and we can still say it's 2.6, but we're going to try to get it to 0. We can still say it's 1.5, but we're going to try to get it to less, because when we say that we're voting on the budget, it sounds like I'm voting on a budget, but we're not. We're voting on a percentage. I just want clarity in my head also, and for everyone, we're not voting on a budget.
Can someone confirm the direction we got from the state with the, was that the bill that you referred to earlier, Ms. Emmanuel?
Sure, that bill was an amendment to a bill that would have resulted in an Act 1 index of 0 for next year. So it would have forced us into a 0. That did not pass.
That's what I thought, and I just wanted to clarify that
Sure.
was the underlying assumption that I had. Okay. Again, I think so much is going to change potentially that I'd rather just sit tight. It's just my preference. But obviously, again, I'm one of 9, but I think every week and every month, every day right now is just so essential. And I think that we're all obviously trying to make the right decisions, but I think the extra time and just looking and to see what happens, especially under these unprecedented economic times that we're facing is worth it in this situation. Thank you again.
Ms. Reed?
Unmute yourself, please.
Yep, we can't hear you.
I was pressing the mouse button. I echo and understand Dr. Sereni's concerns, because since this is a budget talk, we might not be getting all of the revenue we would expect, and it might never come in. So we need to decide, we really want to try to pass a 0 budget, but still people are going to default in their taxes, or do we want to pass a 2.6 budget and hope that the percentage of people defaulting on their taxes is made up for by the people who are able to pay the 2.6. So that's also something, I would say, yes, let's pass a 0 budget. We can do this, but we're still going to have people default on the property taxes, I would think. And that's, I'd like to say what we pass is what's going to happen, but I hear Dr. Serini, and we do need to other considerations such as that, and not just what we think we're going to get in, because we really have no idea.
Thank you. So seeing no further comments or questions, that concludes the budget presentation. And at this time, we will open for our second round of public comment. So I will turn it over to Dr. Whitehead, who has any updated public comments that have been sent in during the last 3 hours, 2 hours, however long we've been here.
Unmute.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. Madam President, we do have some additional public comments. Some are from earlier that they wanted read at the end. So let me read the first one. This one is second. Okay, this one is from Ham Dover, Whitehorse Road. Why wasn't the fact of the business manager termination and his embezzlement mentioned in the audit? Why wasn't the fact of a forensic audit happening mentioned in the audit? These are material under any definition, especially a government audit. We read the audit and there is nothing about these unusual circumstances to be missing. Next public comment is the second part of Ms. Longo's comment, and she has an addendum after that. The most important function of the board is policy. Second is budget. This board is failing to live up to its responsibility to keep the public engaged and informed on both by not hosting live public meetings with live public participation. From the very first meeting of this new board that had to be adjourned due to inability to facilitate a discussion, this board has been unable to rise to the needed level of leadership. What is the plan for the upcoming budget? Where there be a public meeting to discuss and review? At the so-called budget town hall, no budget was presented. No information or cost was attached to discussion items. Now we know there is going to be serious budget deficits. What is the plan? There are organizations currently working on this, developing strategy and discussing with legislators. While I continue to work with state legislators and organizations to ensure we will have a continued funding for our public schools, I am speaking to dozens of board presidents and members around the state and even the nation. Our local board refuses to speak to me. Why? It is deserving and unprofessional. Where is the accountability, inclusion, and transparency? If you are incapable of asking for help during this crisis, you may not be suitable for the position and may want to reconsider holding an elected position. You are not elected to operate in darkness, but are required to operate in the sunshine. I hope this board will rethink its current stance and return to fully transparent and inclusive functioning. Right now, the public has zero reason to trust this board or its operation. And response to board remarks regarding, this is a quick addendum, this claim of legal threat is untrue. As I stated in my public comments, the criminal investigation was prior to my contact. I informed the board I was contacting the Attorney General and Auditor General. Since they refused to respond to simple questions, this is a diversionary tactic and utterly without merit. I will share all information regarding my communication where I stated I spoke to an attorney. There was and is no threat of legal action. Next is from Mr. Mraz. This pandemic costing the school more money in operations. Dr. Fegley discussed saving energy costs, so taxpayers should take that as we are saving money, and this crisis is not costing taxpayers. Dr. Fegley estimated the district may receive $300,000 from the CARES Act. What will this money be used for? Due to this new normal, maybe a new school is not the best way to proceed when students are learning online. Remember, the additional rooms could be added to the current facilities and review resources you have. There was some concern about a video issue, and comment from Mrs. Longo, one more quick one. Why did Mr. Fazio quote Peasers at 40% and Ms. Rockwood at 34.5%? And last comment was from Mrs. Mraz. The slides presented showing the budget comparisons was unreadable in the virtual meeting on channel 28. Could not find this anywhere online. That concludes.
Dr. Whitehead, could you repeat the last one from Ms. Mraz, Mrs. Mraz, please?
The slides presented showing the budget comparisons was totally unreadable on the virtual meeting and channel 28. Could not find this anywhere online. Presentation was very poor. That concludes public comment.
Thank you. Dr. Whitehead, can we get the presentation up online tomorrow?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we will adjourn the meeting and go to executive session.
I just wanted to comment. I have my hand up before we do that. A couple of things. One, it may be helpful just for future, in case if anybody who else is watching, to have the information online, but also for the comments. I don't believe that we have them. If we do, I had a problem logging on earlier. So I'd like to be able to read along on this end. And then I'd like to also ask, just for purposes of our public and constituents knowing how we're going to address their questions and concerns. I'd also like to offer, because I know how busy Dr. Fegley and Ms. Emanuel are with the food distribution and whatnot, I'd like to offer my time to follow up on any of these budget-related and audit-related inquiries. It's important that we get back to our constituents on these issues. These are points that have been raised time and time and time and time again. And I feel that with the separation of, physically from meeting regularly and then the added responsibilities that we need to have some type of plan to follow up. So I'd like my board peers to consider how we may move forward doing that. And as treasurer, I'd be happy to help facilitate getting a response out to these constituents. Thank you.
So one point of clarification, it's not that there isn't a plan, that with the forensic audit, it is still an open investigation and we cannot publicly comment on it. We are going into executive session for just that reason. So I just want to clarify, it's not that there isn't a plan. Thank you. At this time, we are adjourned and we will move to executive session. Thank you, everyone.